Hey guys, welcome to Embrace the Question. This is Steve, and tonight we're continuing our study on the seven churches of Revelation. We are on church number 2, Smyrna. So I hope this blesses you. If it does, be sure and like and subscribe. I'm going through all of these if it kills me, and it just might. But hang on, we're going to tackle this in a way that I find very unconventional. In fact, if you want the conventional teaching on these seven churches, you're not going to get a lot of that from me because I am trying very hard to avoid it. There's so much teaching out there that sounds the same. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I am saying there's more to it than the traditional views, which I have written a lot about personally in my own studies, and I've taught it. But I really feel like people want to move past the teaching that they already know, that they've heard on these, and there's so much there. So let's talk about the church at Smyrna. Okay, this is about 8 points that I'm going to cover tonight, so I'm not going to spend too much time on any one of them. Smyrna is often considered the persecuted church. If you're going to look at the meaning of these church names, or any really of the names in Revelation, you're going to want to drill down into the Strong's numbers and follow them all the way back up into the Hebrew, okay? I really believe with all my heart that Revelation was written in Hebrew, not Greek. If you go to Revelation chapter 9, it's a dead giveaway because the author John is talking about Apollyon and how in the Greek tongue it is translated Apollyon. Well, why would you need to say that in the Greek tongue it is translated XYZ if it's already written in Greek? It wasn't. It was written in Hebrew. So I like to follow my Strong's numbers. I do that on my PDA all the way back to the Hebrew, and I like to use eSword. I've used it for a decade now almost, and it makes it really easy to do that. I keep it with the KJV plus, so I have the Strong's numbers, and I drill all the way back in until I get to the Hebrew. So Smyrna, known as the persecuted church for good reason, because when you go all the way back through the Hebrew, you'll find that it's the old familiar Hebrew word of Mara, which means bitter. It's the spring that Israel came to after they left Egypt. They were out in the wilderness. It was hot, it was dry, and they finally come to a spring, and the darn thing is not drinkable. It's poison water. And so they call it bitter, or Mara. That's where we actually derive the word Smyrna eventually. But it means bitter, vexed, provoked, or grieved. So that's the name. Who is... Let's start to read a little bit here so I can cover this kind of in order and we'll have some context with it. But this starts in Revelation 2:8. And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I will remind you that Jesus always introduces himself as the solution to your problem. He knows what this church is going through. He knows they're faced with death. He knows they're faced with tribulation and pain. So he's introducing himself, who was dead and is alive. He's introducing himself as the one who has already overcome death, which we should definitely keep in mind as we walk day to day, because this applies to much more than just a physical death. This applies to death in a relationship, or death of a job, death of fill in the blank. We experience death in some way every day. But Jesus is the one who overcame that for us, and we have hope because of that. He said, in this world you will have many troubles and tribulations, but do not fear, I've overcome the world, right? Okay, let's keep going. Verse 9. I know your works and your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. He's saying, listen, if you live by the Spirit, then what you're seeing and experiencing is less than. It's a less than. It's not your reality. You feel poor, but you're not. You're rich. Living by the Spirit. That's just focus here. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. This is an interesting passage. Why would Jesus? Who would Jews be to Jesus? It's not the answer you might think. He's not talking about the descendants of Abraham. He's talking about those with the inner circumcision, those who are Abraham's descendants because of their faith, not because of their physical bloodline. And he takes a lot of time talking about that to those on the Temple Mount during his lifetime. And Paul takes that ball and really runs with it. If we go to Revelation 2, what was that one? 2:29. Paul talks about the inner circumcision, and so he's talking about those who have crept into their midst and are putting. The problem with that group was they would come in, infiltrate a group of grace people. We still have this today. They infiltrate a group of people that believe that Christ did all of the work, and they start heaping up rules and regulations on them, saying, nope, you're less than, you don't do this, you're not circumcised, you're not going to synagogue every week, you're not XYZ. So they had been infiltrated by such a group, and that was part of their tribulation that they were going through. That was part of it. They say they're Jews, they're not, but they are the synagogue of Satan. Now, the synagogue is an assembly, and Satan is the accuser. So this can be translated. They are the synagogue, an assembly of accusers, or an assembly of accusations. That's what happens when you start to get into a performance-based gospel. You are always being accused, even if it's by your own conscience. If you are trying to impress God through your ability to perform at anything, morality or anything else, then you are going to be your own worst accuser. You are going to, in a sense, become a synagogue of an accuser because you're going to accuse yourself. So again, trying to avoid the conventional, we're talking about points you can teach on from these verses here. Verse 10, fear none of those things which you shall suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. Okay, fear none of those things which you will suffer. They were no doubt suffering during this time. This was a persecuted church in Asia Minor. Rome had decided that Christianity was not in line with the vision that Rome had for itself. They had a king that they held fealty to that was not Caesar, and this was treasonous to Caesar. So these guys were truly persecuted. The devil's going to cast some of you into prison. The accuser is going to imprison some of you. Now, spiritually speaking, again, if you are in a performance-based gospel type of situation, then you become the accuser. But even if you are not, you're holding on, you're clinging to the grace message. There are plenty of other accusers who are willing to take the place. You really need to do this. You really need to be in your Bible. You really need to be praying. And it's bad. We as Christians, we are really bad at shooting our own wounded and attacking our own. We fulfill this prophecy right in our own lives, and we become imprisoned to self. And we try ourselves. You may be tried. Yeah, that happens, and we fail it. We don't live up. If we are trapped in that, we do not live up to our own standard. And you will have tribulation 10 days. That's a hard one. That was a hard one for me. If you do a cursory search on 10 days through Scripture, you are going to run across 10 days of time that separate the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement, two of the fall feasts. There's 10 days there known as the Days of Awe, where starting at the Feast of Trumpets, they started a 10 days solemn assembly where they fasted and prayed and hoped that God would accept the atonement for the coming year. Now, how do you translate that into the Spirit? Well, from the time of the trumpet, which is a loud, clear symbol or message, then there's this time where you're pondering, where you're wrestling, and then you have a realization of the finished work, which is the atonement. Do you see it? We go through this in our own lives. We hear the message, it rings true. The Spirit in us says, yeah, but the mind is like, what? That's just offensive to me. And it takes a period of time of us wrestling before we realize the atonement has taken place. So it says, you will have tribulation 10 days. You will wrestle with this tribulation. You will tribulate over this for 10 days. Be faithful unto death. For them, it was probably faithful unto their own death. But for us, it's be faithful unto his death. He was the finished work. It was his atonement. He was the death. He was the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. And I will give you the crown of life. See, when we have that realization in our life, that becomes a crown of life to us. You see how this can work? This is really deep, and I'm just now grasping it myself. Let's continue. This is the 8th point. That's the last one. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He that overcomes shall not be hurt of the second death. He that overcomes, or he that is a conqueror. He that is a conqueror. It's not, in my opinion, it's not Jesus saying, if you can manage to overcome. No, he's saying, no, you are a conqueror. He that overcomes, he that conquers, shall not be hurt by the second death. Well, in him, we are more than conquerors. So if we are in him, that's done deal. And I think that's what he was saying. He that conquers won't be hurt by the second death. He that conquers, he that has this revelation of the finished work, which is Christ who died as us, who resurrected as us, who is the resurrection. We have that inner revelation, that inner realization. Then all of a sudden the crown of life is ours because we are operating in a resurrection lifestyle. We just went through this with our church, John chapter 11, and the death of Lazarus, where Jesus is saying, I am the resurrection, and you can walk in this if you understand it. All right, well, I hope this blesses you. I hope this gives you something to really chew on, especially if you have to teach this. And teaching it isn't the easiest thing in the world because this just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But stick with it, meditate on it. And next week is Pergamum. I will see you then. Bye-bye.